I still remember the first time I realized how heavy my own heart had become. But because of the invisible chains I had wrapped around myself, chains of desire, of holding on, of refusing to let go. I thought love meant possession. I thought success meant clinging to what I had. I thought happiness came from keeping everything close. But the truth revealed itself in a way I could never forget. There was once a little bird that visited my window every morning. Its wings shimmered in the light, and its song filled my days with joy. I grew attached to it so much that I feared the day it wouldn't come. And then, one morning, it didn't. I waited. Hours turned into days, and my heart ached with longing. When it finally returned, I made a decision. I placed food inside a small cage, hoping to keep it near me forever. To my delight, the bird hopped inside, and I quickly closed the door. At last, I thought it was mine. I would never lose it again. But soon, I noticed the song was gone. The bird sat silently, its wings drooping, its eyes no longer alive with freedom. The joy that once filled me had vanished. Instead of happiness, I felt guilt, sorrow, and a strange emptiness. I had wanted to keep love close, but in trying to hold on, I had killed the very thing that gave it beauty. The bird was no longer the same, and neither was I. It was then that I began to see the truth of what the Buddha once taught, that all suffering arises from attachment. The pain I felt was not from the bird, nor from life itself, was from my desperate attempt to control, to cling, to make impermanent things permanent. And isn't that what we all do? We hold on to people, to possessions, to moments of joy, as if they could last forever. But everything changes. Everything passes. And when it does, our hearts break, not because change is cruel, but because we refuse to accept it. That morning, as I opened the cage and watched the bird take flight, I felt both grief and liberation. I understood that true love is not about holding tightly, but about letting things be free. And from that single moment, a question began to echo within me. If all my pain comes from clinging, then what would happen if I dared to let go? Would I finally discover the freedom my heart has been searching for all along? When I began to look deeper into my own suffering, I realized it was not just the bird, not just a single memory or incident. It was the pattern of my entire life. From childhood, I was taught that happiness comes from holding on, told your toys, your friends, your achievements, and never let them go. When I was praised for doing well in school, I clung to that praise, desperate to feel it again. When I felt love for the first time, I clung to that person as though my existence depended on them. And when they left, as life naturally takes people in different directions. I thought my world had collapsed. The more I searched, the more I saw that attachment was like a hidden root, buried so deep within me that it spread into every thought and action. Just like a great tree that looks strong and unshakable, but whose roots are tangled around stones and earth. My soul was bound tightly to desires, expectations, and illusions. The Buddha once spoke of this root, calling it tanha, craving, the endless hunger that binds us to the cycle of suffering. I did not understand it then, but now I see how that thirst never ends. We drink and drink, but the more we consume, the more we crave. I remember walking through a marketplace once, watching people rush to buy clothes, jewelry, food, trinket size, glowing with excitement, as if each purchase could finally complete them. But the faces I saw a week later were restless again, searching for something new. It struck me that I was no different. I too chased after the next accomplishment, the next affection, and when I obtained them, the satisfaction was always fleeting, like water slipping through my fingers. Attachment is not love. It disguises itself as love. But in truth, it is fear. Fear of losing, fear of change, fear of the unknown. I held on to people, not always because I truly loved them, but because I feared being alone. I held on to achievements, not because they defined me, but because I feared I was nothing without them. Every attachment, I realized, was a thread of fear woven into my being. And the more I pulled on those threads, the more tangled and suffocated I became. One night, sitting in silence under the dim glow of a candle, I asked myself, why do I cling so tightly? The answer whispered back from somewhere deep inside, because I believed that these things defined who I was. If I lost them, I thought I would lose myself, my identity, my worth, my sense of belonging, all tied to things that were never truly mine. How foolish it is to define the eternal soul by temporary things. Yet, that is the illusion we all live in. There is an ancient story of a king who once had the most precious jewel in his crown. He guarded it day and night, terrified of losing it. The king fell into despair, believing he had lost everything. Yet, his wise teacher said to him, "The jewel was never yours, you only carried it for a while. What causes your suffering is not the loss of the jewel, but the illusion that it belonged to you." Those words pierced through me as though they were meant for my own heart. How many jewels have I tried to protect in my life? And how many times have I wept when they slipped away, forgetting that nothing truly belongs to me? The root of attachment lies not in the things themselves, but in the mind that clings. A flower blooms and fades, yet we mourn its death because we want it to last. A season changes, and we resist because we long for permanence. We live as if we could command the universe to obey our desires, and when it does not, we cry out in pain. This is the true root, the delusion that life should serve our attachments, rather than us flowing with its natural rhythm. Slowly, I began to see that every moment of pain in my life could be traced back to one single mistake. I tried to hold on to what was never mine to keep. My parents, my friends, my possessions, my youth, even my very breath, all borrowed, all passing. And yet I, in my blindness, had called them mine. That night, under the candlelight, I whispered to myself, if attachment is the root, then perhaps freedom is not about gaining anything new, but about loosening the grip. Perhaps true love is not born from possession, but from presence. And perhaps the greatest courage is not in holding on, but in learning, slowly and gently, how to let go. I began to notice that attachment never ends with a single desire, reads an entire cycle. One craving gives birth to another. One fear fuels the next, and before long, life becomes a wheel that spins endlessly, carrying us round and round without ever stopping. The Buddha called this samsara the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Truth. I saw it within the small details of my daily life. When I was young, I thought happiness meant being loved. I longed for approval from my parents, my teachers, my friends. And when I received it, it felt sweet, almost intoxicating. But soon after, the sweetness faded, and I needed more. Every smile, every word of praise, every gesture of affection became like a drop of water in an ocean of thirst. No matter how much I drank, the emptiness returned. I realized that this is how craving works. It feeds on itself. It promises fulfillment, but gives only a fleeting taste, leaving us hungrier than before. As I grew older, the cycle only deepened. I chased after success, believing that if I achieved enough, I would finally be free of insecurity. I worked harder than ever, collected accomplishments like treasures, yet each achievement left me restless. The moment one goal was reached, my mind was already fixated on the next. It was like climbing a mountain with no peak each step gave. The illusion of progress, but the summit was always out of reach. My joy was never in the moment. It was always postponed, always dependent on the next thing. And when failure came, as it inevitably does, the pain was unbearable, because I had tied my worth to an illusion that could never remain steady. Attachment binds us not only to desire, but also to fear. I feared losing what I had, and that fear was often greater than the joy of possessing it. When I loved someone deeply, my love was mixed with anxiety. What if they left? What if death separated us? Even in moments of happiness, shadows of sorrow loomed ahead, reminding me that nothing would last. I realized I could not fully enjoy what I had because my heart was already grieving its eventual loss. This is the cruelest trick of attachment. It steals the present by chaining us to both past and future. One day, I sat in a park watching a mother play with her child. Their laughter filled the air with innocence. But then I saw her expression shift. She clutched the child too tightly, as though fearing someone might take him away. In that moment, I saw myself reflected in her. Love twisted into fear, joy corrupted by clinging. The more we hold, the more we suffer. Because deep inside, we know we cannot hold forever. The cycle does not stop with love or success, spreads into every corner of life. When we cling to youth, aging becomes torment. When we cling to health, illness feels unbearable. When we cling to life itself, death becomes our greatest terror. Each attachment plants a seed of future suffering. Yet, we do not see it. We keep planting, watering, nurturing the very seeds that will one day grow into our sorrow. There is a story of a man who dreamt of owning a golden palace. He worked day and night, sacrificing his health, betraying his friends, ignoring his own heart. After decades, he finally built the palace, only to realize his body was too weak to enjoy it. His friends were gone, and his spirit was weary. The palace stood tall, but his soul was empty. That story struck me deeply, for I saw my own reflection in it. How many palaces have I tried to build in my own mind? Palaces of achievement, of relationships, of possessions, all shining in imagination, but hollow when reached. The endless cycle of pain comes from the illusion that the next thing will save us. We tell ourselves, when I get this, then I'll be happy. But happiness never arrives, because we are always chasing, never arriving. It is like running after the horizon. You see it before you, you run and run, but it only moves farther away. Life slips past while we remain trapped in pursuit, always waiting for tomorrow, never living today. I began to see that even my grief, my anger, my loneliness were part of this cycle. Each time I clung to sorrow, replaying painful memories, I was feeding the same root. I was attached not only to joy, but also to suffering itself. Strange as it sounds, sometimes we cannot let go of our pain because it becomes part of our identity. We say, "This is who I am, this wound, this story, this heartbreak." But by clinging to our wounds, we keep them open, never allowing them to heal. The more I observed, the clearer it became. Attachment is not just a single chain, but an entire prison. It binds us to joy, to sorrow, to fear, to hope. It spins us around and around, leaving us dizzy, exhausted, yet unwilling to step off the wheel. We suffer, we cry, we rise again, only to repeat the same mistakes. And until we awaken, the cycle never ends. That realization terrified me, yet also gave me a spark of hope. If this wheel is created by the mind, perhaps it can also be broken by the mind. If pain comes from attachment, then freedom must come from letting go. The question burned within me. How does one step out of the wheel? How does one find the courage to loosen the grip, to accept the flow of life without clinging, without fear? I did not have the answer then, but I felt a shift inside, as if the walls of the prison had begun to crack. For the first time, I understood my suffering not as fate, but as a pattern I was trapped in. And if I was trapped, perhaps there was also a way out. I remember the night when the weight of all my attachments fell too heavy to bear. My mind was restless, my heart tired, and every thought seemed to end in the same question. Is there no way out of this endless suffering? That night, I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, and in that silence, I recalled the teachings of the Buddha teachings I had heard many times before, but never truly lived. They spoke of a path, a way out of the wheel, a way to walk free from the chains of craving. It was called the Noble Eightfold Path, and though it sounded vast and complicated, I realized that it was not about following rules like a prisoner, but about slowly learning how to see life with new eyes. The first step was right understanding. I had to see clearly that everything I was holding on to was impermanent. No matter how much I loved, how much I achieved, or how much I gathered, nothing could last. At first, this truth felt harsh, almost cruel, but slowly I began to realize it was also a gift. If everything is impermanent, then pain, too, is impermanent. Grief passes, fear passes. Even the darkest night eventually gives way to dawn. The problem was never that life changes. The problem was that I kept fighting against change. Understanding this was like opening a window in a suffocating room. But understanding alone was not enough. I needed right intention, the decision to let go, to live not with clinging, but with compassion. Am I holding tightly, or am I allowing life to flow? Slowly, this intention reshaped my actions. I began to speak more gently, to listen more deeply, to notice how many of my words were born from ego and attachment. Right speech, the third step, became a practice of truth and kindness, not to manipulate or control, but simply to share what was real. I saw that even in my work, attachment had poisoned me. I was chasing success, not for joy, but for validation. When I began to practice right livelihood and right action, I asked myself, does this path bring harm, or does it bring peace? Am I working to serve or only to feed my ego? Slowly, the way I lived began to shift. I realized that freedom is not found in renouncing the world entirely, but in transforming the way we move through it. One of the greatest keys I discovered was mindfulness, to sit quietly, to breathe, and to watch my thoughts without clinging to them. At first, it was unbearably difficult. My mind was like a storm, dragging me back to old memories, pulling me forward into endless fears. But the more I sat, the more I realized that thoughts are like cloud shapes that pass through the sky of awareness. I am not the cloud, I am the sky. That simple truth gave me space inside myself. The grip of attachment loosened, not by force, but by gentle observation. Meditation became my teacher. I remember sitting under a tree one evening, eyes closed, listening to the rustle of leaves in the wind. I felt the rise and fall of my breath, the beating of my heart. For a moment, I forgot the endless chase of desires. I was simply here alive, breathing, present. In that moment, I realized what freedom feels like. It was not about owning anything, not about controlling anyone, not about securing a future. Freedom was already within me, waiting, hidden beneath the noise of craving. I also began to practice metta-loving kindness. At first, I directed it toward those I loved. Then, slowly, toward those who had hurt me, and eventually toward myself. I realized how often my attachments came from self-hatred, from the belief that I was incomplete. By offering kindness to myself, I loosened the need to seek completion in others. By offering kindness to others, I loosened the chains of anger and resentment. Still, letting go was not easy. Each time I felt myself clinging whether to a memory, a person, or even to pain itself, gently reminded myself, this too will pass. Sometimes I had to remind myself 100 times in a single day, but each reminder was a step on the path, and slowly I noticed the cycle of suffering weakening. The wheels still turned, but I was no longer being spun helplessly. I was learning how to step back to see it, and to choose not to be caught in its motion. There is an old story of a monk who carried a heavy sack on his back. When asked why, he said, These are my attachments, my worries, my fears. And when asked why he did not put it down, he smiled sadly. Because I have carried it so long, I forgot I could let it go. That story became my mirror. I too had been carrying a heavy load, mistaking it for my identity. But when I dared to loosen my grip, when I dared to set it down, I discovered that I was lighter than I ever imagined. The path to freedom is not about escaping life, it's about living it fully, without chains. It is about walking each step with awareness, with compassion, with acceptance. The pain of attachment taught me where my prison walls were, but the teachings of the Buddha showed me the door. And though I am still walking, still learning, I know now that freedom is possible. It is not hidden in the future, not locked away in distant places. It is here, in this breath, in this moment, waiting for the courage to let go. As I look back on the journey of my life, I see how much of my suffering came not from the world itself, but from the way I held on to it. I clung to people as if they were mine to keep. I clung to memories as if they could live forever. I clung to dreams as if they were guarantees of happiness. And every time life moved, every time something changed, I broke apart inside. But now, I understand life was never breaking me. Life was simply moving forward as it always does. It was my refusal to move with it that tore me into pieces. When I opened the cage of my attachments, when I let the bird of my heart fly free, realized something beautiful. Love does not die when you stop clinging. Joy does not disappear when you release your grip. In fact, the opposite is true. Only when you stop clutching desperately do you finally begin to feel the fullness of life. Love becomes pure when it is not poisoned by fear of loss. Happiness becomes real when it is not chained to conditions. Peace becomes possible when it is not tied to control. I wish I could tell you that letting go is easy, but it is not. The mind will resist, the heart will tremble, and the hands will keep reaching for what they know. But here is the truth. You do not need to force yourself to abandon everything at once. Freedom begins with the smallest of steps. It begins when you notice yourself clinging, and instead of tightening your grip, you take a breath and whisper, "This too will pass." It begins when you choose to love someone without needing them to complete you. It begins when you sit in silence and allow life to unfold without demanding it to be different. The Buddha once compared attachment to holding a burning coal in your hand while blaming the fire for your pain. We cry out, "Why am I suffering?" Without realizing, we are the ones refusing to let the coal go. But the moment you open your hand, the pain begins to fade. The fire does not change, you do. That is the power you hold within you right now. I have seen people lose everything: wealth, status, even loved ones, and yet still walk with peace in their hearts. And I have seen others who had everything, but were restless, bitter, and afraid. The difference was never in what they had, but in what they clung to. Do not let your life be measured by the weight of what you carry. Let it be measured by the freedom of what you release. There is a story of a monk who stood by a river, watching leaves float downstream. A student asked him, "Master, what is the secret of peace?" The monk smiled and said, "See how the leaves do not resist the current. They move with the flow, and the river carries them. That is how peace is found, not in controlling the river, but in learning to flow with it." I carry those words in my heart every day. Life is a river. The more we resist, the more we drown. The more we surrender, the more we float. So I say to you now, as one who has struggled, as one who has suffered, as one who has learned, you are not your attachments. You are not your possessions. You are not your successes or your failures. You are not even the people who come and go in your life. You are something greater, something freer, something eternal. And the key to discovering that truth lies not in holding on, but in letting go. Imagine for a moment what it would feel like to wake up tomorrow with no fear of losing anything. Imagine walking through your day with an open heart, loving fully, living deeply, without the constant voice whispering, "What if it goes away?" That is freedom. That is the life you were born to live. Do not wait until life forces you to let go. Begin now. Release one small attachment, even if it is only a single thought, a single fear. With every release, your soul will grow lighter. With every step, the prison walls will fall. And one day, you will realize you were free all along. You simply had to remember. As I close this story, I leave you with this. Let go, not with despair, but with trust. Trust that the universe is wiser than your fear. Trust that your true self cannot be lost because it was never bound. And when you trust enough to let go, you will discover the greatest treasure of all, a peace that no one can take away, a freedom that no change can destroy, a joy that is not borrowed from the world, but born from within you. This is the gift of walking the path. This is the promise of freedom. And it begins not tomorrow, not in some distant future, but here, in this breath, in this very moment, if only you dare to let go.